I want to start by thanking everybody for getting here. Again, it's an awesome night outside. I appreciate everybody coming in and joining us to talk about some things that this is what you wanted to be talking about, right? Special education and remote learning. So we definitely, I think we have found a rock star in this. And so I hope that we get a lot out of that. Let's go ahead and do our weekly shameless plug for SoWeLead.com. Definitely a lot of resources there to be using, and be watching that space because we'll be putting up some information about the Google Field Day. We're working on those plans. And if you are not following us on Twitter, you definitely need to be doing so at SoWeLead. And Amy put that link in, and JD put the link to the website in. That's awesome. And I just want to tell you, if you're not on Twitter, you really need to be. Building out your PLN, because that's how I found tonight's guest. I reached out to somebody that was in my PLN who's in Nevada, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for somebody, and he's like, this is the guy you need. I reached out. Here we have him all the way from Oregon, right? So, I mean, we're halfway across, or more than halfway across the nation. So if you're not on Twitter, you definitely need to be doing that. And also, one last thing before we get away from it, if you have not looked at iceconference.org, JD, if you could throw that link up as well, that is the summer conference, and it is free. You definitely need to take advantage of it. I think that there's already like 1,000 people signed up for it. There are over 5 days, 90 hours worth of PD. 80 let's see, I think it was 80 different ed tech leaders, authors. We got people across the board. Nate Ridgway, who's a friend of the show here.
We're actually over 90 now, John. So speakers wise, so
90 speakers. So
yeah, it's blowing up.
Awesome. And again, that was that power of the PLN, right? Because we just started reaching out like, hey, who wants to join us? Bam, there it is. And those names in there, you're not going to beat. So definitely, get in there. You are not committed to 5 full days. You bounce in, you bounce out, get what you need and go. All right. And I just want to again say that this tonight is a direct response of what you guys were looking for. You said you wanted to learn about special education distantly. We're going to do that tonight. We're also going to do that again Tuesday night. We're going to bring in my department chair. She's going to be talking with us a little bit too, kind of some, X's and O's that are going on locally. We will then go to once a week. We will skip June the 2nd. That'll be ICE on PD. I'm sorry, PD on ICE. And then we will resume again the following June the 9th. So the regular format follows. Please put your questions and things in the comments, and we'll just kind of pass them out and bring you in as we go. Brett, let's go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
There we go.
There you go. You got mute like I did.
Yeah, I don't know what it's doing. I press it and it's I've been doing enough of these. You'd think I'd have it figured out by now.
Yeah. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the group.
Okay. Well, my name's Brett Bingham. I'm a special education teacher in Portland, Oregon. I teach at a specialized school for kids with pretty extreme behavior issues. So we're not a typical schoolroom. But I have been doing resource rooms the last couple of years in schools right around where I'm at right now, and kind of have some info going from both sides of that job, the resource room job, and then my own job now. Yeah, that's probably good. And now I'm an online teacher, which is completely different. It's like being a first-year teacher in many ways.
Yes, it is. And not by choice, right? Not by choice.
Yeah, I've been avoiding this stuff, in fact, and here you are. You've got no choice now.
Awesome. Yeah, that's true. That's so true. Well, go ahead. The general format, like I shared with you before, is, we'll let you share a couple of your ideas out, some things that you've seen that have been working, some ideas that how to help reach out, and then we'll just let the conversation evolve from there.
All right. Well, I'll say first off, I'm kind of probably most well known for being somebody willing to butt heads with an administration if I'm not happy with things, and I'm a little bit of a troublemaker. But I have to say, in this case, what I've been seeing in my district doing, I feel is really stepping up to the plate. It's really best foot forward. What we did initially, and this is a learning process as we've gone on because things have changed. I've learned to change how I go about my own professional development in ways. Those first couple of weeks we kept getting, we want you to do this thing by Friday. And, it'd be Tuesday and I'd stay up late Tuesday night and I'd get that PD thing done so I'd understand. And by Thursday, they changed their mind. And that kept happening over and over again. So now I'm a little slower to jump, and that's probably good. But so we did a PWN, so a prior written notice with parents. And along with that was a breakdown of the IEP goals. So we went through every IEP. We took out every goal, academic, put it in academic math, reading, writing area, and then all the behavior and everything else. And then we looked at the online learning platforms that we were going to use. And we're using a combination of Seesaw for things that I'm making myself, Excel, which is doing all the academic upkeep and the video games, some of them, and lessons that the students continue to do until they master that goal, and then they'll move up. So by doing that, I was able to really just quickly go through the IEP, say, well, IXL will cover these academic goals, which left most of the goals left to deal with having to do with behavior, speech, occupational and physical therapy. A lot of those issues are something we still haven't figured out. And then we looked at ways that we could meet those from home during distance learning. And I began thinking, my job is temporary. I end in the middle of June. June 6th is my last day. And I was actually applying for this job, but all that's frozen. So my kids are going to fall in this funny little spot here where they don't have a regular teacher over summer and then going into whatever happens in the fall. So I got very worried. So I put together a program to keep my kids all the way through the summer so that they couldn't fall on a gap. And what that has meant on the IEP and the paperwork side is that I did have to make a plan for all those goals, like behavior. We do a lot of peer goals and socializing. So playing a game, taking turns, using the vocabulary you learn in a game and use in a game. And because, we can't necessarily say our kids have games at home that they can play. They might have some games, but maybe it's not something I could really ever win at. So I began to think, well, do my kids all have the games they need to meet the rest of these goals and activities and whatnot? So I spent the last week making kits for each individual student based on all of their IEP goals that I couldn't meet online easily, and giving those tools to the parents so that I feel like I've done my best practice by, in this distance time of learning where even shopping is limited. I can't go buy a game for everybody right now. And because I'm ending this job in the middle of June, I can't really spend a lot of money. So I ended up making all my own. I printed up a lot of card games, matching games, things I knew that my students could 100% win, like a card matching, where you just turn everything down and take turns seeing if you can find a pair. So that's a pretty lower kindergarten, first grade goal to match likes and that sort of thing. And so I started there with my kids and built programs up from that. And I do, think that we're going to have to address on a national level the amount of money that teachers are spending out of their pockets right now to keep their education systems going.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what everybody's spending. I know how much I spent. So that's kind of where my district went getting us prepared for this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, do you want to stop, ask some questions or?
Well, I got a couple questions here that the chat here. What age group?
Oh, I'm sorry. So my school has K through 12, but it's divided into two schools. So I'm actually a K through 5 functional life skills, but I do have 6th graders. So I guess I'm K through 6. Okay. That's a pretty big spread. It's a pretty interesting class. And that's why everything I make, there is no curriculum for, I've got 1st graders and 6th graders. So,
Mm-hmm. And what range of disabilities do you have in there?
So my class, my school is, it's no one's going to be in my school if they have behavior that could be managed somewhere else. So my kids, have a very wide ability spread. Some of them have missed a lot of school. Some of them are just very behind. And then some of them are excelling in academics, but it's the behavior that has to be addressed. And behavior, I got to tell you, distance learning, that's one of the hardest things to figure out, because the kid has the behavior currently. So they came to you from home, where this is a behavior that's already at home.
And then we send them back home.
Right. If the parents could fix it, they already would have. That's the thing. If they were able to fix this on their own, they already would have. And now they're back, with these kids. So I was looking at my own behavior programs, which is all based on giving my kids moments of such great success that they forget about everything else and they're just happy and they're at school and they love school for that moment. And I build on that. And we have one of those on Monday, and we have 2 of them on Tuesday, and 3 on Wednesday, and Thursday maybe there's none because it's a bad day. Who knows? But I had to give the parents those tools to move from minute to minute to minute of success to success to success. I do that in my room with a lot of art, with a lot of creating activities, with a lot of hands-on stuff. So I can't say to the parents, do a hands-on activity that will help you. I have to sit down and cut out all the pieces to make the activity and put them in an envelope and give those to the parents, because they need that kind of support. They don't realize, that doing a construction paper activity every day, making something, is actually starting something and working from start to end, and is copying from a model and is cutting and using all of these other skills. So maybe they don't see the value in it, but the real value is I got your son, who never participates, to sit down and make a paper dinosaur today, and tomorrow he'll make a kangaroo. And so I do a lot of things like that. We build on success, and sometimes that success has to be art. And I had to give the parents all of my tricks so that they could replicate it at home. Couldn't see any other way around for my kids, because they're pretty heavily impacted by their disabilities. I have a functional life skills class, but it's not a typical one, because there was such overflow in the behavior rooms that I ended up kind of a split. So I have behavior kids, and then kids who are there with just functional life skills. They need a lot of supports.
And you mentioned a PWN, a prior written notice. Can you just touch on that again? I think somebody wanted to make sure they understood what that was.
Yeah, so my district decided, and I've discussed this with enough people that it seems like everyone's like, yeah, that's kind of the way to do it. It's just a written notice to the parent about a change in basically placement, but it's a change in service that we're going to try to meet all of the goals on the IEP through a new plan of distance learning. So it's just basically saying we're stepping out of the brick and mortar, we're stepping into distance learning, we're going to translate everything the best that we can. And that's why we did that document. It's the tracker of all the IEP goals, to show how we were translating the goals into distance learning. And I was able to meet pretty much everything. There's a few goals that I couldn't, because of the way they were written. And that would be like, we'll play a game with a peer. But now this is a kid in quarantine with his mom and his grandparents. So he's going to play with his family instead. But I then let the family know, hey, this is what you have to work on. So I made some of my activities that I sent home, will say, play a game of cards with someone at your house. And when you're done, you have to be a good sport while you play. And when you're done, you have to thank them and give them a compliment. So if they do that, they earn one of their tokens. I send them prizes. But what I really want them to do is to have a nice time, have no grief, just play a game like every kid enjoys doing, every adult enjoys doing, be successful. But then, to tie it back to the goals of taking turns in conversation, saying something nice, whatever those speech goals might be. So I built my activities around those goals, but they were easy to do. I just had to make sure that how I was meeting those goals at school can be replicated at home
Okay.
without taking the easy way out and saying, well, play a game. I had to provide that.
And do you then get a report back from the parents? Do you touch base and say, how did this go? Is there any kind of tracking on that, or?
Well, so for the online learning, yes. So the Seesaw and IXL, I get a report as people finish it. The Seesaw's been, I really enjoyed using it because the kids can make a little video in response to one of the activities. One of the things I did, and you can get these off of Twitter, I put everything under a hashtag story and art. So these were, I took read alouds off of YouTube. All my kids, one of the best parts of the day in my classroom is when they sit and I read them a story. But some of my kids are visually impaired, so I can't sit here and read them a book on the computer. The book has to be right up in front or they can't see any pictures. So I've used SAG and AFRA, the Actors Union. They've done a whole bunch of read alouds that are on YouTube. So some very well-respected actors reading kids' books. That's perfect. So I made activity cards, assignments where they watch one of those, but then do a simple art project that's for all ages. So because many of these kids, it's a mom at home with 2 or 3 kids. I've got one mother, she's 3 kids at home by herself, and all 3 kids are autistic. And she's just struggling. She's doing a great job. Oh my gosh, doing such a great job, but it's so hard. And for that mom, when I sent them took their box, I did sets of 3s. I couldn't send one kid, all of the stuff, and the other 2 kids have nothing. So, I'm looking at family units, and I've already forgot your question.
Oh, no,
I my kids, and then I'm thinking of him standing at the window when we saw him yesterday. And
no, I was just, because you said that you created these activities that met specific goals, and was there some sort of way that you tracked?
Oh, right. So some of my parents have really taken on the job of using the computerized program, because my kids, they're not the kind of kids that just sit down and can do it. They have to be set down and help sign in, and then the parent probably has to stand, pretty close and keep an eye so they don't wander off and do something very naughty. So the kids that are using IXL, that gives me data at the end. I get reports saying this many kids, they've answered this many questions, they've mastered this many academic things. And IXL, parents can sign up from home. They don't have to have a school account. They can only use it for so long if they don't have a school account. But so it's just IXL.com. There's some things I'm not happy with, because they kind of grade things as they go. Kids, if they mess up, can lose a lot of the points they've earned, and I don't ever take away points. So I've heard complaints about that, but we're not focusing on that. So that hasn't been an issue. But so
do you report any of the data from like the parents when they say yes, they did play the game, yes, they were?
Well, so if they do IXL, I'll get the data that they've done it and mastered it. If it's the Seesaw, when they finish it, there's a way for them to let me know right there as they finish it, either by typing, recording, or filming. Hey, we did this, we liked it, but to give me some sort of feedback. So on the Seesaw, I'm getting those back as well. And quite a few times they're videos, just saying, hey, I really like that. But it's good to see that they're interacting. Mm-hmm. Now, I only have about 60%. If we were doing numbers, I have a small class, by the way. So as kind and generous as I might sound, I took boxes to all my students. I don't have that many students, so I could do that. I was very lucky. Yes. And I know not everyone can. My resource room job, I had 60 kids, there you go. I have 6 right now that I have to take care of. So I can be more generous because of the small number. Mm-hmm. But because of that, I've taken all the card games that I made. Those are all PDFs. They're all shareable. So anybody who's listening tonight, I think what I'll do is maybe put them on a pay teacher free item as matchup card games. All you have to do is print them out and cut them up, and they're card games for your kids. So if they have a printer, I've been putting a lot of things on teacher pay teacher that kids can do if they have a printer at home. So there's like a kit to make a space station. You can spend a whole day planning a space station, then making it out of paper if you have a copier. So there's some things like that on there.
Awesome. We had a question. Does the PRN become part of the IEP?
Yes. So as we're doing updates. So anybody whose IEPs are falling now during this distance learning time. So it's a PWN, a prior written notice, just of a change of environment, basically, and that we're still meeting the goals in this way. But so we are now, like, I have 2 IEPs to do next week, which are both late, by the way.
It happens.
Everybody, if your IEPs are late, you know, God bless you if you get them done by the end of school year. That's what I say, because I'm supposed to be pretty good at my job, and I've got 2 late IEPs this week. And going up, you know, previous years, up until like last year when I had the resource room and stepped in when there was late paperwork, I could say I never had late paperwork. I was so neurotic about it. So I have 2 late IEPs. So feel better about yourself, I hope. But in the new IEPs, so what we've done, because this year kind of ended so abruptly, we talked to the parents. We're extending this year's IEP. We're going to have a new IEP meeting with the staff. The parents are not going to attend. They chose not to, just because there's so much crazy going on. So we're just going to extend the IEP with the idea that we'll meet again in the fall when we have the data from using all the online stuff over the summer and during this whole spring. It's going to give me great data about academic goals, but most of my kids don't have very many academic goals because they're there for behavior. So
right.
I don't have to teach a whole 5th grade platform of math. I have to teach a specific set of goals. So, you know, everything I'm telling you, the work amplifies up every kid. So I might be making it sound easy, but it's because I'm down here. You know, my kids are really violent, so I can only have so many in the room because staffing, we have to have 2 to 1 if there's a blowout. And there you go. So.
Right. Let me bring Amy in here for just a second here, because she made a comment about the guidelines don't allow us to change the IEPs. Amy, do you see what is that going to be as a problem moving forward? Then what challenge is that going to make for us next year if this continues?
If they can't change the IEP?
Yeah, Amy brought that up. I want to hear what Amy's thinking about that right now.
Okay, so because Indiana is not being very forgiving, they're not. Get your evaluations and your IEPs done. We've done lots of phone conferences with parents, you know, getting letters out to them. I know that we have to put in the continuous learning plan that has to go in their IEP. So now, are we going to change all of them in the month of May? No. But as we move and you do an annual case review, that's the time when you put that in there. So every school had to fill out, you know, Dr. McCormick's JOT form for their continuous learning plan. So in that, it addresses special education specifically. So, you know, it is going to be, I like the prior written consent or prior written notice, where how are you going to address those goals specifically, because then it becomes individualized. Versus just the general plan. But yeah, it's taken a lot of work, and a lot of special ed teachers have had to go above and beyond on these quote stay-at-home days.
I bet. Brett, is that prior written notice? Is that a school piece, or is that an Oregon piece, or?
No, it's federal.
Okay.
It's federal. It's the way that we would do anything if there was a change to how we're providing a service. So, you know, let's say there's a goal that says Johnny will spend half an hour in the library, but the librarian's let go and the library is closed. You could do a PWN and say, we no longer have a library, so we can't do this goal.
Okay.
Or we're going to adapt it and use books in the classroom.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. So now moving forward, Brett, then are you guys looking at, and it was a comment that was made earlier, are you guys looking at then revising these IEPs moving forward to address online or distance, or are you going to keep the same goals and then just adapt what you're doing to them?
That's the goal right now, and that comes, just from talking to the moms and parents and my staff, and we all felt like, well, they're all still working on these goals. They've missed a pretty considerable amount of time, and my case is so strange, mind you. My class went without a teacher from until February when I started. So, with the conversation, looking at their data and how they were performing on the goals they had, losing several months at the end of the year, there was no way that those kids were really past any of their goals. So it was a comfortable decision to say we need to, just kind of move this forward. We'll do these things. However, my fear was that that these kids would be trapped with a 2-year-old IEP almost by the end. And I didn't want that, especially if they're academic goals. So I'm putting in there the caveat, that we're meeting again in the fall to look at all of the academic data that we can pull together, because we don't really have access to some things right now. And I certainly don't have access to prior work from the classroom. So we have parent permission to move it ahead, to revisit in the fall and to make changes, but to add that PWN to say, this is how we're going to address everything in the IEP. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't make any changes. One student that we think needs more speech time, which we can't really service more right now, but he's about to move. And we had been planning on adding speech time to him, which we can't really meet right now in the right way, but we're adding that. So we're like, he may be moving to another state where this time is just not enough. So that's going to change. That's a change we discussed with the parent. We really wanted to add more time. But it becomes part of the IEP that we're teaching at home. Yeah.
So would you rather see, Brett, the IEP adapted to say, look, or I guess not adapted, changed or revised to say, look, you're going to do this distantly, remotely, online, however you phrase that, or is the better move to say, no, we're going to stick with the goals and we're just going to adapt? Which do you think is the best route?
Well, I don't think that we dare throw out the system that we've worked so hard to create. And as much as we might hate it, it exists because we've had a long road to get here. So, we can't stop meeting the needs of our students. They deserve that as much as anybody else. And
right.
It comes down to some of our kids will not learn through an internet connection. So we have to make a different plan for them. And that's going to mean adapting those IEPs, but I don't think we throw them out. And I think, I think the government really needs to stop for a minute, take a deep breath and say, well, hold on a minute. We have these people for 8 hours a day doing this amount of work, and we can't hold them to that right now, maybe, because there's too much crazy stuff going on. So how do we streamline some of this paperwork so that it's not, IEP for me usually is an 8 to 10 hour process with all the testing and everything else. And, that we need to simplify things to get some weight off the shoulders of some of these people who are just, I can't imagine what a resource room teacher is doing right now, besides paperwork to paperwork to paperwork to paperwork, trying to fill in all these PWNs and, for each student. I was really intimidated when they told us to do this, even with my small number of students. I thought, this is terrible, because they weren't forms we could cut and paste. It was a lot of writing and typing in, and and they kept changing their minds. And I thought, am I doing this for nothing? But what it did is I sat down, I looked so carefully at all of my goals to see how I could meet them. And it meant that, wow, hey, half of the burden I was worried about is actually taken care of with these academic programs. I only got to worry about this other half. And that being able to see everything I had to do so clearly and how I could meet those goals by doing A, B, C, and D that I do in my room. I just need to move that to home. That was all very good for me in my practice.
Awesome. Did you prioritize some of those goals or some of those behavior things? You're like, okay, so I've got 6. I'm going to really focus on these 3, or however.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I don't know what else to call it. It's like a Sophie's choice with my students, because I had 5 students. Most of my kids would do the online work, but I have a student who, on a scale of people impacted from autism, he's a 10 with some stars. And I knew from the minute I started this work that not everything I was doing didn't apply to this one kid. So what I did was the same thing. I still had to write out his IEP, but it was all blank. I had no idea how to meet such difficult goals for somebody who I wasn't going to be working with face to face. And so what I ended up doing for him is I took up the first week and I worked really hard getting everything online that would impact the most kids, getting as much down as I could so that the most kids I had would be able to use that. And then I just stopped and I spent the next week only on this one kid. And I figured, he deserved it. In my classroom, he didn't get as much of my attention because he was having to leave a lot. And I felt like he just needed that time. So he's a kid that I had to make everything from scratch, everything. I made a lot of put-in jobs for him, but in my classroom, I refuse, if I have kids doing put-in jobs or sorting jobs or matching games, I don't let them do the same thing every day. I don't believe in that. If you're going to say play a match game and you want them to do that 5 days in a row, then you give them 5 different match games. You don't have them match the same thing over and over. You don't have them put the same blue token in the can and the red token. The next day it's got to be frogs, and the next day it's got to be something else. But there has to be that same variety that we give to every student. They don't do the same thing over and over every day for 10 years of school. So, that's what I did for him. I made sure that he had that. And then when it was finished, it was a weight off my shoulders. Everything that I do in my room, best practice for a kid like him. I made a little home version, but now it was out of, frosting containers and all these things that, I could use around the house. But that student was a hands-on student and he got what he needed. And then since then, I've done that same focus towards my other kids with the behavior issues. One kid who's kind of mean, it just meant everything I did for him had to be packaged as a kindness activity. So, draw a picture to put in the sign to thank your mailman, things like that. Everything had to be a kindness. But his parents couldn't sit down and think of 100 different activities to do. They needed a list of 100 activities to check off as they went through. So that's what they got.
What kind of feedback are you getting from the parents?
It's been so sweet. So I told you my kids have behavior. So I've had some parents that are really confused. They don't know what to do with some of this. And they're in my school. If they're in my school, that means, they've been through their local program to get put into a school like mine, which has a big waiting list. And you don't get there unless your behavior is dangerous. It's hurt someone or yourself, pretty much. So, now these kids are at home all day, and, I see their behavior at school when I have 5 assistants in my room, and I have a psychologist that works with just 2 classrooms, mine being one of them. I have a behavior specialist. I have coaches. I have all these people on this team that are incredible. And they've all been reaching out to the families to give them their expertise. So we've all made the same behavior supports that we make at school. If you can make them at school, you can make a set for home. And that might be the time you spend on that kid, but it might be the best time. My behavior kids, I know 100% that their behavior is more important than anything else. If they go into adulthood and they can't read, but they're nice to people, they'll be better than if they're mean and hurt people. I know that. So I have no problem saying I'm not going to worry about some of these other things. I'm going to try to focus on ways to help the parents have the best behavior they can have at home and not backtrack in that area. And I'll do that with academics if I can. Rewards can be tied to work.
So, let's kind of broaden this out a little bit, because I know a lot of the people in our group here, they're working with regular classroom teachers in an inclusion mainstream setting, or they may not have the same level that you have. What advice would you take from your experience and the reactions you're getting and the process you went through? What would you say to that, that one layer up, maybe? I don't know if that's the right way of saying, but
Right.
that,
No, I understand. I understand.
yeah.
No, it's very strange because
pass on.
It's very strange because I've spent most of my career working in functional life skills. So, and at a county level. So people say, if you picture special education with the most impacted people being right there, I've almost always taught right there. So I know, but the last 2 years I did resource rooms. So I was down at the bottom and saw this whole different picture and the numbers. So when I think of broadening out, I think every teacher is an inclusion teacher these days. If not for special needs, like an actual learning disability, then for behavior. We all have those kids that have some behavior that has to be modified somehow. So, looking at those kids, what I'm saying is it's really the same. If you think of my room, and most of my kids could do a lot of it, and then there were some at the top that just weren't responding and couldn't do it that way. So we're talking about those kids in your classroom. And, as a resource room teacher, I was in and out of all the different rooms all day. And so I know that you guys are all doing this. It's the same thing. It's like, well, okay, this is working for most of my kids, but not this one or these three. And those are the ones where you have to sit down and adapt. But there are so many things out there to find adapted material. And, I have kits that I made for my students, like to make a castle, or, we Xerox it and they cut it out, because the fourth grade across the hall was studying medieval times, and they were studying about castles and doing castle stuff. So my kids built a castle. I couldn't teach them everything that they were learning about feudal lords and everything else, but my kids did something in the same time period that was hands-on. So my advice, if you know those kids, the ones that have a real hard time sitting down, then those are the kids maybe you find the activities for, or the printouts where the kid has to sit and cut and really think. But we have to find the same numbers of growing learning hours for every kid, and it doesn't have to look the same. But this online learning has potential to be very standardized, which then leaves most everybody out in one place or another. So we have to avoid that. And this is the time to really let your mind go and fine tune, and look on Pinterest and Teacher Pay Teacher and see what your peers in the education community are making that they're willing to share, so that, all you really have to do is just print out a couple things different for that kid.
And so it's really all about right now. It's not a different goal now. It's like identifying, like, here is the goal that we want to really focus on, and just what's a different way of doing it.
Well, I think it comes down to two. We've never had clearer messages from our students ever in the history of teaching of whether or not they're going to clue in or check into the way that we're teaching. So I have been at 40% for my live classes, 40%, but I have a small class, so my numbers are irrelevant maybe. But I know teachers who I feel are top of the line educators that, when they share a video of their classroom, I sit there and I'm jealous that I'm not 15 years old sitting in the back room of this teacher's class. And, last week, one of them tweeted that he started crying because his first kid had showed up, finally. And this is a teacher, I've seen videos of his room where his kids are cued into what he's saying, and they're working, and it's a fun environment, and they really like him, and they're not showing up for his class. And that's clear. Maybe that something's not working, even if we're doing our best. So we have to look at that disengagement as information. And maybe it's not even on our student, it's on the parent. But if the parents aren't going to sit their kid down at the computer for a couple hours a day, or a half hour, or just for one single 10-minute lesson that's really a video game, we're kind of powerless too.
So we really want to focus in on that goal to differentiate for that kid, and then what is going to be the engaging way to accomplish that.
Right.
So we're really looking at a delivery platform issue. Yeah.
Well, I think that when we're looking at those hands-on kids too, it really just simply comes down like, my students with autism do a lot of like books that have Velcro where you move the pictures around, and they're constructed that way, with the Velcro and the lamination, because they have to hold up so they're not torn up and ripped apart. I could tell parents, hey, make this matching game, here, just cut it out, use stickers on a piece of paper, but they're going to be torn up in one day. They're going to be dirty on the back. So, oh, the one with the raspberry stain is the brontosaurus. And I brought you, so this is something I made for one of my kids. He loves dinosaurs. And I printed him out a game, and then I thought, well, wait, can I do this with stickers? So this, I think you can see that all right.
Yeah.
These are just this. I printed out a page that had the 9 squares so that I could just make decks of cards with whatever I was using. And in this case, these are just dinosaur stickers. And I had enough to make 2 sets of cards, and then I ran them off of my copier. I have my own laminator. I can't help it, but it's just a little one. And I have, a copy printer like everybody else, but mine has, color. So, I can now run this off anytime I need it the rest of my career. My kids get a really detailed game to play. And this is for that kid that I know isn't going to read today on the internet, if I sign him a Newsella article. But he will sit down and he'll play a match game with his family and take turns and hopefully speak nicely. But they'll also appeal to him because they're dinosaurs and he loves them a lot. He's the same kid. I made this. This is a reward he gets if he, oh shoot, I gave him the only copy. Well, I made a banner. So this it's a triangle I printed out. This one I did for Rose Festival, but his just had a dinosaur picture there. So he could print out and color a banner, to hang in his room. And then since I had the template made, this is Rose Festival, I'm their special needs coordinator. So I made a banner kids can just download for Rose Festival and color and hang up. So just activities, to keep them busy, but also that are geared in mind to, some of those IEP goals, but also fun.
Yep. Do you do any kind of video lessons with the kids?
So I've been doing live broadcasting. It varies. I've had kids set off during the middle of it. A siren went by, and that got him really freaked out. It really seems like about 20 minutes is the most they can go, and we're using it as a chance to teach them to say, well, listen, my students, this young man I'm going to tell you about is autistic. So one of the things we're working on is for him to use his words to say, I'm finished. I'm done now. I'd like to stop this, instead of lashing out. So I can meet that goal on video conferencing because he tells me now, Mr. B, I want to go. Say, excellent. Thanks for letting me know. I'll see you next time. So
awesome.
It's that chance in some ways, but I'll be honest with you. And I don't know how many other people feel this way, but this is the simple truth too. I feel like every victory I have teaching online is a dagger in my back, because I feel like it's going to be used against me to say, see, teachers can do this online. Why can't they have 40 students and just do it online? Why can't they have 50 and just do it online? So I feel like every time I do step it up, I feel like those boxes I made for my kids, those are some of the best things I've done in my entire career. And I feel like I stab myself in the back professionally to do that. I put that effort into my classroom, not their houses usually, you know? So there you go. It's kind of double-edged.
Let's open it up. I know we've had some decent comments on the chat and stuff. Does anybody like to kind of wrap up or make a comment and stuff before we kind of get to the end here? Anybody got some ideas they want to chime in, or a question that you want to chime in with? Anybody? It's okay. I know we've been having kind of a running conversation in the chat too. So, well, Brett, then let me turn it to you. Why don't you put a bow on this and take us home with this now?
Okay, so something fancy to finish with. So here's something that I think we're not talking about enough, and that is that this newer generation of teachers that we have coming into the profession are facing something very different than we have faced as a profession. You know, education's under attack. They want to privatize us and make money off the system. And I won't get too much into politics, but I do feel like, you know, we have to defend our profession pretty carefully. And we have these new teachers coming in that are coming in under fire, kind of. And I've always been a mentor teacher and always thought, well, you know, your mentor teachers know best. You should listen to them. And now we've got these new people coming in who are born and bred in a system where the profession they chose has been under attack their entire lives. So it's not like some of us who grew up thinking teachers were the most magnificent things and never heard the news say anything bad about a teacher. You know, well, now we have this more cynical group of young people who are becoming teachers. And I love the power that they're sharing and the leadership some of them are taking to step out. But what they've done is they've taken their age group, which is so interconnected, and all the platforms to share and teach from and learn from. And that is part of their teaching. And they have shared that with us. So me as an older person who, you know, my best teaching comes when I have a pen in my hand and I'm drawing for my students and making things for them. And, you know, now I've got these young whippersnappers, you know, saying, well, it's great to do that, but, you know, if you use this program, you could share that with 10,000 kids in 5 minutes, you know? So these teachers that are so young and we used to think really needed us, we need them just as much right now as they probably ever needed us. So I think it's a real revolutionary time for education. I do hope it shows that distance learning is an absolute miserable failure. I do hope so, because it will strengthen education in the long run. But this interconnectivity that the younger teachers have brought to us has forever changed this profession. I think it's a really good thing.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey, and one last thing, if you can quickly, before we wrap up, can you quickly tell your Stephen Hawking story?
All right. How quick? How much time? Is there 10 minutes left? I won't use it all.
Okay. Go ahead.
So if you guys are really bored, there's a Wikipedia page on me. I got fired right after being Teacher of the Year. I was told to do some things by my school district that I did not care for, including like bringing them my personal mail from home for them to open and read to make sure I wasn't saying anything in my private time that they didn't approve of, just some crazy stuff. So I ended up fighting them. They fired me. I was only fired 2 weeks. I got my job back, but then they bought out my contract and I spent the next year off. I never am off. I just am never off. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be home, I'm going to make something for kids every day. And I'm going to send a letter every day to somebody thanking them for their work. I just decided that was going to be my year. It was my year of growth and healing. So I wrote Dr. Stephen Hawking a card. I didn't do emails. I sent cards. And I said, I just wanted to thank you. In my classroom last year, I had 9 students with talking machines. And you were my example to them of how they have to use their machines, or nobody knows what they want or who they are. And I would tell him that, you know, Stephen Hawking is the smartest man on the planet and nobody would know it if he didn't use his talker. So I sent him a letter and I get contacted back by Stephen Hawking's assistant saying, "Thank you so much." Oh, well, I'll get to that later. Thank you so much. The doctor would love to meet with you if you're ever in Cambridge. And I thought, what? I'm like running to buy a plane ticket. So I ended up going to Estonia to work on some autism books that I make. And on the way back, I stopped in Cambridge. I got to meet with Stephen Hawking. And I thought it would be, just a 1-minute handshake on my part, or pat, or a photo. I didn't know what, but he had set aside an entire afternoon. And the whole time we talked about accessibility and the talking machines. He made a video for my student. I had a young lady, she couldn't move her body. She couldn't talk. All she could do was watch. So her whole day was watching. And she got this eye gaze talker, but she had to stare at it for 4 seconds for it to connect to type a letter or the icon. And she would have tremors. And as soon as her body shook, it would disconnect and she'd have to start over. It was terrible. So Stephen Hawking made a video for her to keep using use your talker more. And it was really nice. And then before I left, I had talked to a news person who had said, "Oh, it's interesting that you're going, but it's not news that you're going to go meet Stephen Hawking." And news to me, but not to them. So I'm there, and I had taken gifts from Oregon, and one of them was a Timbers scarf for him, and I brought his whole staff one. And it's called a scarfing, I guess, if you're really into soccer, and that's when you get a star to wear the scarf. So suddenly, I'm coming back from my meeting with Stephen Hawking, and it's in all the news that I scarfed him. Nobody cared about the special needs. Nobody cared about the accessibility. It was just that he was wearing a Portland Timbers scarf. So at first I was so disappointed that they weren't talking about disability. But then, as you read into the story, it's like, well, it starts with that. But then it talks about why I'm there. But then Major League Soccer put it on the front of their website, and Univision put it in Spanish on their website. And so suddenly there's just this, a funny story, Stephen Hawking and his scarf.
That is awesome.
I came home and we stayed in touch, which I couldn't understand. I was like, why does this guy want to stay in touch with me? I'm nobody. And after he passed, the news, I'm on the West Coast, so it was just before I went to bed. So I wrote his assistant and said, I just saw that he had passed. And I just heard from him like the week before. And she said, I might choke up when I tell this because I do sometimes. I'm sorry. But she said, the reason he stayed in touch with you is because I was so thoughtful to his staff. And I had a room with, all the pairs and the kids on these talking machines, and those machines don't work unless there's someone programming them all the time. They break. And he was having all the medical procedures. I'm a medically fragile classroom teacher for many years, so I know what his staff does to keep him healthy and able to communicate. And I had brought presents for his staff, and I always included them in my messages. And that is why, in the end, that the smartest man in the world stayed in touch with me and kept writing to me. It ends up in the end. Maybe not because of my great work, but because I was thoughtful of the people who were so important to him. So it was a very good lesson to learn for me.
Awesome. That is a great story, because I've been dying to hear about the scarfing. I've been dying to hear about. Hey, Brett, I want to thank you for coming and joining us. I know that you had no connection to us at all. We're over here in the boot heel of or the bottom of Indiana, but thank you for taking time out. It is what is it now there? It's like 5 o'clock there, right?
Yeah, it's still early. It's going to be just 6. But
yeah.
Hey, I know some incredible teachers from Indiana. I know Mr. Perkins, one of your teachers of the year from 2014. I know quite a few Indiana teachers, so I'm honored to be here tonight. Thank you so much.
We totally appreciate you joining us. And again, just a reminder to everybody, we will be talking about special education remotely again on Tuesday with Marty Crafton, who is my department chair. So she's going to bring in some local X's and O's, I think. And I think that's going to be some pretty good feedback there. And then again, we won't meet on the 2nd. That'll be a PD on ice. And then we will get back together on the 9th. All right. Everybody, I want to thank you guys for joining us. Brett, I appreciate this. Thank you so much. And if you guys, again, remember, check out the iceconference.org. Make sure you get signed up for that. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Brett. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you again for having me.
Hey, thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
I'm going to drop the link to the feedback form in the chat, but because we did go for an hour, I'm going to have to update your certificate so you get an extra half of a point. So I'm going to drop that link in, but if you would give me like 15 minutes to update that before you fill it out, because they're automatically generated when you hit submit, then that way you will get your full point.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. We'll see ya.